Hey guys, welcome back. This week we're going to learn how to forgive your father and how your issues with your father, unresolved issues with your father, may contribute to what's going on with the Jeffrey Epstein situation. How to forgive your father. It's an important part about becoming a man, about becoming your own man, about becoming an individual unto yourself. There is a Twitter discussion, perhaps debate a couple weeks ago, on not how to forgive your father, but whether it's right to forgive your father. But the people who said that it was good to forgive your father, and it is good to forgive your father, the people who said that, they gave no instruction on how to do it, and this speaks to a larger problem with psychology about treating a high-order concept like a low-order concept. There's a lot of actions. There's a lot of awareness. There are multiple steps that go into you forgiving your father. That's not a decision you can simply make, like having discipline. You don't just choose to have discipline. You work on the mechanisms of your psychology, and eventually you get to the place where you naturally have discipline. I mean, telling somebody to have discipline or forgive their father, it's like saying, well, cure cancer. What's wrong with you? Just cure cancer. Just make $1 million. You can cure cancer and you can make $1 million. But there are steps to doing that. First, you have to open up a biology textbook. First, you have to learn about business management to make $1 million. There's steps involved there, and there's steps involved to forgiving your father. And I think a lot of our father issues are coming out now more than ever because, this Jeffrey Epstein apparent suicide or apparent murder, perhaps suicide, either way you want to look at that, it's a little fishy, to say the least. And I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning the official story, but I think what's going on is our anger, our venom that we put on the situation. Can it really be about that situation? I would argue it's more about our father, and this is why it's very important to handle our issues with our father, because if we don't, these resentments that we have will come out in a bunch of other ways, whether it's with what's going on in CNN or this Jeffrey Epstein situation, whether it's with a woman, or whether it's with any other institution of authority like the government, for example. So the first thing that you need to do, if you have a lot of resentment towards your father, and I would just define resentment as anger you hold on to. I think anger is a great emotion. It is extremely helpful. All emotions are useful. Sadness is useful, but we become aware of the sadness, we get angry, and it can be extremely useful. But the problem with anger is when we don't know how to manage it in the proper way. And one example, or one way of not managing the anger in the proper way, of just holding on to it, not really doing anything with it, not using it to get your needs met. And if we don't do that, then it becomes resentment, and it just becomes this thing that we lug around. And we are not really aware of it, but then when somebody cuts us off in traffic, we get really pissed at him, not realizing the resentment is ultimately about our dad. Or when Jeffrey Epstein dies in jail, and it may not be a suicide, it may be a murder, and this may be covering up some deep state pedophile ring, whatever that you project onto it, and you get angry about that, and it ruins half your day, then it's not about that situation, right? It's probably about something more personal to you. So the first thing to do is to simply list out your resentments. Where do you feel like your father wronged you? And I know we're not supposed to talk about this, right? You're just supposed to get over and not even talk about it. Yeah, in order to get over this, you first have to talk about it in an honest way. And before you even do that, simply make a list. Where you think your dad wronged you. Maybe he hit you when you were a kid and it still bothers you Dad, how could you possibly hit an 8-year-old? I would never hit an 8-year-old. I can't believe my dad would do that. Okay, so you're pissed at him for that. List it out. Maybe he didn't encourage you. Maybe he was, even just sarcastic. Just always sarcastic. And it's fine to be sarcastic, but, it's a little bit too much, a little bit too early of an age. It becomes sardonic, and you're like, it just really kind of hurt. So list all these things out. Just get really comfortable listing it out. And this helps a lot because it takes the arguments that you're having in your head with your dad and it puts it on paper. So now you can see it. Now it just naturally becomes more objective. And then once you do that, once you list out your resentments, list out how you are responsible for those in a way, how you may have contributed to these resentments. Even if, look, when you're 8 years old, you get beat up by your dad, there's nothing you could have done about that now. But by being angry about it now, you are contributing to it. There is a way in which you are responsible for this. And this is no fun to consider, but it's just helpful to consider both sides of the issue for your objectivity. Because what happens when you're responsible? You're no longer hostile with your anger. You no longer put your anger on other people. You're no longer helpless with your anxiety. You no longer put your anxiety on other people. Taking responsibility is becoming aware of your own anxiety, of your own anger around any sort of specific issue. In this case, we're talking about resentment around your father. This is difficult to do and it's no fun, but I'm telling you, if you really want to forgive your dad and move on and become a man unto yourself, you gotta really look at how you could possibly be responsible. Not for the inciting incident, not for what you're particularly angry at with your father, but how you are contributing to it now. Specifically, go back to my video on secondary emotional payoff. What kind of payoff you could be getting for being resentful about your father? Well, if you're resentful about your father, you don't have to take responsibility for your own life, and taking responsibility is uncomfortable. Then when something's not going right with your life, you can always blame your dad and not you in your own actions. So that would be one payoff. That would be one way in which you are responsible, in which you do contribute to the resentment. The next step would be to list out how you hurt him. Now, you probably didn't hurt your dad initially, but perhaps to get back at your dad subconsciously, you manipulated him, you you were lazy, you didn't really do what you wanted to do, because I think we talked about this last week. If you were successful and you went out and had the life that you wanted, then your dad would have a successful son who went out and did the life and lived the life that he wanted, and he doesn't deserve that. So you're going to hurt yourself to get back at your dad. You're essentially hurting your dad for how he hurt you. A lot of this happens unconsciously, but this is all but this is how we become aware of it, so we can get to the place, the high order concept, right, of forgiving our father. How you could hurt him, and maybe you did it in more explicit ways, like bilk him out of money, for instance. Maybe he has a lot of money, and you thought, well, I wouldn't usually manipulate somebody out of their money, but in this situation I would, because he hit me when I was 8 years old, and I can't believe you would do something like that. So yeah, look at how you've hurt him, and chances are, if you feel resentful about somebody, you have reciprocated that. In fact, when I say chances are, I mean 100% chance. I'm sure you've done something. And this isn't to say who's more right, who's more wrong. It's just about bringing awareness to the issue, to your resentment around your father. And then the fourth and final thing, is to talk with him. Everything that you've listed out, your resentments, how you're responsible for these resentments, how you've hurt him. This is about creating a better connection with your dad. And I know this is difficult to do, and most people won't do this, which is why most people will never forgive their fathers, because they don't do the real work. They'll make the decision to forgive their father, but it's a delusion. What they're ultimately doing is repressing all these issues that I just talked about here in steps 1 through 4. List out resentments, how you could contribute, how you may have hurt your father, and bring these issues up with your dad. And he may not be receptive at first, but it's not about your father being receptive. It's simply about you communicating better, about the communication that you need to do to bring more awareness to your life. You're doing this for your father, or you're doing this for you, not for your father. That's the main takeaway here. And if you have any difficulty with any of these steps, this is the point of therapy. Therapy is a stepping stone to having better communication in the real world. So if you're not ready to maybe bring awareness to how you may have hurt your father, this is something that you talk about in therapy with somebody who is at least relatively objective, who knows more about the human experience, who has more experience working with people through these issues, so you can bring light to your unconscious issues, to your unconscious resentment faster and more accurately. And then once you get through all these issues, once you get through step 1 through 4 and become more aware of your resentment with your father, I think you'll realize that the ultimate cause of the resentment, especially after you start talking with your dad about these issues, about these very sensitive issues, the ultimate cause of the resentment was your disconnection with him. And then once you're over the resentment with your father, when Jeffrey Epstein commits suicide, supposedly, it's good to question it. Maybe we can have an investigation on this, but you're not going to waste half the day on Twitter getting angry about it. And that's the real point. And I'll leave it there. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. And always remember that when it comes to forgiving your father, what you're ultimately doing is becoming your own father.